be talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. A little bit of a Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening edition of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Hope everybody's ready for what should be a loaded Tuesday night show. Listen, I know these Tuesday shows have been more of a full speed ahead react and preview to all of the big games the coming weekend. This weekend, though, there's a couple things. One, there is a huge game that everybody wants to talk about. Two, there's so much uncertainty in all these other games. You know, Texas A&M's quarterback situation for Texas A&M Arkansas, Auburn's quarterback situation for Auburn and Oklahoma. So instead, what we will do a little bit different today, we are going to focus solely on Alabama, Georgia to start. The big one, the game that everybody is excited about, everybody's got an opinion on. By the way, drop your thoughts on that game into the chat right now. Chat's been a little bit quiet over the last couple of days, but today, that's where the show begins. We'll preview the rest of the Week 5 slate later in the week. Today, we focus on Alabama, Georgia to lead the show. From there, we'll hit on what has been a very newsy front end of the week. Lane Kiffin called out Hugh Freeze. So Hugh Freeze, we talked about what he said on Saturday. Well, Lane Kiffin had some thoughts on that. We will react to Lane Kiffin's thoughts. Then some odds and ends to wrap the show. Realignment got really weird on Monday afternoon. I'll just tell you quickly what happened and what it means for college sports going forward. There is also a little bit of college hoops recruiting news that I do want to get to, including Braylon Mullins, one of the top players in the class of 2025, cutting his list down to 3 schools. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel on YouTube. New clips, new videos going up every single day, so make sure that you are subscribed. Also, if you do listen on podcast, make sure that you are subscribed. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, make sure that you are subscribed. Also, leave a 5-star rating and review. Really would appreciate your support. By the way, speaking of support, I got to give a quick shout out to our partners. We've been working with them for a few weeks now. It has been a pleasure, and a quick shout out to Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Okay, so bottom line, I know I've said it, but look, it's football season, okay? You're on the couch. Monday night, we had 2 games. You're on the couch. Thursday night, we got Giants, Cowboys. What a debacle that's going to be. All day Saturday, all day Sunday, and you're sitting there saying, I can't turn myself into a big old slob, okay? So what can I eat that is healthy but also delicious? Well, Collie Puffs is your answer. That is the alternative to that sloppy, gross, greasy, chips, salty food crap in your food aisle, okay? So here's the bottom line with Collie Puffs. Started by a family not far from where I'm from, and it was really 2 things. One, Joey, who started it, huge football fan. He was actually at the Raiders-Panthers game the other day. But 2, beyond that, young kids sitting there saying, what can I feed them that is healthy but also delicious? So he came up with Collie Puffs. They are baked, not fried. They are made with great ingredients, but here is the thing. They still taste delicious. So to find out more information, go to ColliePuffs.com. And as I've mentioned quite a bit, they are also available on Amazon. So you're on Amazon, you're buying whatever. I don't want to know what's in that cart, but throw a couple Collie Puffs in, try them out. I promise you, you will like them. They are the healthy alternative. By the way, in those Amazon reviews, go to Collie Puffs and let them know that Torres sent you. But again, ColliePuffs.com, also on Amazon. They are the delicious alternative. You will enjoy them. Appreciate Collie Puffs' support of the Aaron Torres Pod. With that said, it is Tuesday. We got a mega showdown on Saturday in Tuscaloosa. There is no more time to waste, so let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, like I said, listen, I know these Tuesday shows, we've done a lot of previews of 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5, 6, 7 games. This week, though, there's uncertainty in several of these games, but this is the big one. This is what everybody cares about. As you can see on the scroller, top 5 matchups, 7:30 Eastern. College game day is going to be there in Tuscaloosa, Georgia at Alabama. By the way, as I said, drop your thoughts, your comments on that game in the comments section, as well as what else you're excited about for college football this weekend. But let's go ahead and dive in. Let's talk about Georgia, Alabama, because we know how much is at stake, right? Last week, we talked a lot about Tennessee, Oklahoma, Oklahoma's SEC opener, Tennessee, Josh Heupel's return. This week, there is just as much, if not more, at stake in this one in Tuscaloosa. Obviously, Alabama, the reigning SEC champs. Georgia, the team that believes they are the new king of the SEC. Kirby Smart, he's kind of the face of the league. Oh, by the way, Kalen DeBoer, this is not only his first big test, but also a welcome to the SEC moment. So this is a big one. Georgia is a slight favorite coming into this one as we record here on Tuesday. And I want to break it down from all angles. And what has me excited about this game, but also a little nervous, I'm not going to lie, is that this is kind of the time of year where I do think that we all kind of think that we know about teams, but we're still, it's early in the college football season. We're learning about college football teams. And what stands out to me is I believe as we go further into college football in this 12-team playoff era, I think college football is going to be a little bit like the NFL in terms of you don't have to be great in week 1, week 2, week 3, but can you get better throughout the year? You look at a Michigan, they look a million times better Saturday last week than they did against Texas 2 weeks ago. And so I don't think either of these teams is a finished product. And I don't even know how much we actually even know about these two teams right now. But let's dive in. Let's start with Georgia. And when I say we don't know, I don't mean negative. I mean, we frankly don't know. Because to me, I look at Georgia, and Georgia fans, tell me if you disagree, doesn't feel like this team has totally hit their stride. But in my opinion, that question becomes pretty simple. Have they not hit their stride because they're not as good as we thought? Because it's a 12-game regular season that could be a 17-game season and Kirby Smart is building up? By the way, is it possible that the competition is just better than we thought? Clemson all of a sudden looks really good after they played Georgia. Kentucky, maybe not the best team in college football, but Georgia always Kentucky has always played them tough at home against Georgia. So these are the conversations that we need to have. But where I want to start with Georgia, to me, the big one coming into this one, I'm going to pull the M&M. Will the real Carson Beck please stand up? Okay. Last year, I thought he had one of the most underrated college football seasons that I've ever seen. This was a guy that last season, because of Brock Bowers, because of all the talent on that roster, he was a guy that completed 73 nearly % of his passes, 24 touchdowns, was absolutely awesome. Thought he was wildly underrated. Well, so far this year, he hasn't been bad by any stretch, but he's down to about 68% completion percentage. By the way, if you take out the Tennessee Tech game, it's about 66%. And we all saw that Kentucky game where it wasn't pretty. 15 to 24 passing, 160 yards in that game. By the way, Georgia has always been able to complement Carson Beck or the quarterback nicely with a run game. Well, you go to that Kentucky game. Let's call a spade a spade. That was a game where Georgia struggled to run the football, 102 yards rushing in that game for the Bulldogs. Contrarily, or I don't even know if that's the right word, but when I think about Georgia's defense, it's kind of the same. We know they have talent, but all offseason, Kirby Smart has been talking about this D-line isn't as deep as it used to be. It's not as talented as maybe it was, 1 through 9, 1 through 10 in terms of guys that can play. Well, Kentucky was able to run the football on them. Is that a reflection that Georgia just isn't good? Is it possible that they're just developing at a slower rate than usual? Is it possible in terms of the Kentucky game that they were looking ahead to a bye in this Alabama game? These are the questions that we are going to get answered on Saturday in Tuscaloosa. From the Alabama perspective, they got their own questions. And listen, I've loved the early part of the DeBoer era. You're 3-0. You've looked how you've wanted to look, but there are questions nonetheless with Alabama. First of all, just the health of Alabama. I think it's worth noting that O-line was fully healthy against Wisconsin. Now, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. Remember when they played Wisconsin, or the week before Wisconsin, they played South Florida. They struggled deep into the third quarter, early fourth, before they pulled away. Well, as it turns out, it's because they were missing both of their starting tackles to start the game. Elijah Pritchett comes in late. All of a sudden, you start moving bodies around, and all of a sudden, you're able to move the football much easier. Good news if you're a Bama fan. By all accounts, it sounds like that O-line is healthy coming into this game. Malachi Moore, who has been injured, I saw one of the assistant coaches spoke yesterday, said he is healthy coming into this game. And so that's the cool part, right? And I give the SEC credit for that coming into this game, is the idea that this is the biggest game of the early season in this league. Love that with the extra bye week this week, both these teams are coming in off of the bye, so they're both fully healthy or as close to healthy as you can be this time of year. And then for Bama, kind of the other questions, I think to me are pretty straightforward. Is one, Kirby Smart said earlier this week, he believes that Jalen Milroe is truly improved. But two, is he really improved? Has the competition been bad? Is Wisconsin just worse than we thought? Again, what did I just say a minute ago? This is that time of year where you start to figure out, was that team just bad and that means this for that team that they played? Or is that team really good? Is this team really good? Is this team better than we thought? We're going to start to find out. Jalen Milroe. And then, of course, DeBoer. Listen, I'm a DeBoer believer, always have been a DeBoer believer. But the counter to that is, with DeBoer is he ready for this SEC stage, and is he ready for the most talented team that he has coached against early on in his tenure at Bama? So that's what's basically at stake. Now I want to get into what's actually going to happen in this game, because I will tell you that when I break this down, maybe I'm going against what I know that I just said about, do we really know about these teams? But the more I look into this game, the more that I think about it, the more that I'll just be honest, I'm not going to beat around the bush in terms of my pick. I actually like Bama to win this game, okay? Bama, as I said, a slight favorite right now against Georgia. The first part, listen, I just think we all, and I include myself in this. Remember, I'm the guy that picked USC to beat Michigan last week. I think we all just underestimate how hard it is to go on the road in conference play and get wins, especially when the teams are pretty even. And I think you would argue that these are two of the three, at the very least, most talented teams, top to bottom, 1 through 85 in the SEC. If you want to say Texas is better, if you want to say whatever, Tennessee's in that short conversation, that's fine. But there really isn't that much of a gap between these two teams. And so when I look at these two teams and I look at the fact that Alabama's got that home field advantage, I do think that it's big in this game. That goes without saying. Two, I'll be honest. Maybe by Sunday night when we're all reacting to this game, I look like a total freaking idiot for saying this, okay? And by the way, there's a very good chance that it happens. Georgia just doesn't quite seem right to me this year. I think Alabama, to me, is a little bit closer to what I expected coming into the season, especially once they got healthy, than Georgia. With Carson Beck, listen, really good. There are probably 120 college football teams that would trade their quarterback situation for Georgia's right now, okay? Hugh Freeze, Brent Venables, you go on and on down the list. There's a lot of people that would love to have Carson Beck at 80% of what he was last year, but he's not the same guy so far this season. Again, is it because he's missing Brock Bowers? Is it because he's missing whoever, some of the running backs? The run game, by the way, has not figured it out. Etienne was out in week 1, comes back the next couple weeks, but they couldn't move the ball against Kentucky. And I don't think if you can run the ball against Kentucky, or if you can't run the ball, the quarterback's going to struggle even more. And that's where I worry coming into this game. I really like Carson Beck, but he has not looked the same. By the way, maybe it was just he had a lot of talent around him last year. The schedule was easier last year. Not saying they didn't play good teams, but I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with Carson Beck, because he doesn't look right to me. So there's that element of it. Beyond that, I think the other matchups favor Alabama, right? This is a styles make fights kind of deal with football. Like, football is a stylistic game. Certain teams just match up better with other teams. And when I look at this game, let's just think about it. First off, we talked about the Alabama O-line. Well, this is the same Alabama O-line, essentially, that had a ton of success a year ago against this Georgia front line in the SEC championship game. Now, they didn't dominate. I wouldn't say that it was a stone wall a bulldozer. They didn't rush for 400 yards, but this group had success a year ago against the Georgia defensive front. So you have that. Obviously, being at home helps. And then the other matchup that I do like, I think the Alabama game, the Alabama passing game is better than it has been. Now, the Georgia secondary is awesome. But I also think that coming into this game, the Alabama secondary, which has been in question, has been better, and Malachi Moore is healthy as well. So all of a sudden, Alabama's getting healthy in all the right places that could be weaknesses that are now going up against Georgia's strengths. So I could go on, but I like Bama. The last factor I do want to mention, I just really like DeBoer in big games. Okay, now, again, maybe I look stupid come Sunday night, but we've talked about Kalen DeBoer all offseason on this show and on this channel. When you look at DeBoer's track record, when you look at what he has done in big games where there isn't a massive talent differential, not only is the win-loss record good, but DeBoer, in my opinion, is as good as anybody in college football. Now, this doesn't mean Kirby Smart stinks or Steve Sarkisian stinks or whoever else you deem to be the best coaches in college football. I think he is, and we talked about it all offseason, as good as anybody in college football at putting together a unique game plan for that specific game, that specific opponent, and taking advantage of their weaknesses. We talked about it last year. Pac-12 championship game, that Oregon team. Remember the Pac-12 championship game? Washington was a double-digit underdog to Oregon after beating Oregon earlier that year. And yet knuckleheads like me picking against Washington yet again. DeBoer put together a brilliant game plan. You beat Oregon. You go to the big the college football playoff against Texas. All of a sudden, Texas, oh my God, how good is Texas? Oh my God, they're too big up front. They're too physical up front. Alabama has no chance. Then it turns out what happens. DeBoer puts together a brilliant game plan, short passes, deep passes. Don't try to run the ball right into that front, and they find a way to win. So I'm not saying that DeBoer is the best game day coach that's ever existed. I'm not saying that Kirby Smart is terrible. I'm not even saying that DeBoer is better than Kirby Smart. But DeBoer in these big games has been lights out. 3-0 against Dan Lanning lifetime, 2-0 against Sark. And I think he goes 1-0 on Saturday against Georgia. I am picking Alabama to win. I'm picking them to cover. I'll say 27-24 is a final score. I like Bama in this game. I do. And we'll see if I look stupid by the end. By the way, for people wondering, this is not a Georgia shirt. So if there was any doubt, not picking Georgia, not wearing Georgia gear during the show. But yeah, I do like Bama to win this game. And as I said, if you're just joining the show now, we're going to do our full weekend preview later on in the week. Just felt like there was too much uncertainty in some of these big games. Auburn doesn't know who their quarterback is. There's no reason to preview Auburn, Oklahoma when we don't know who's going to even play quarterback for Auburn. We don't know who's going to play at quarterback for A&M. So later in the week on this channel, if you don't follow the college football betting podcast as well, we do deep dives and in-game big game breakdowns on that feed as well. So make sure that you're subscribed. But in this one, I like Bama. I like Bama outright at home against Georgia. All right, fun first segment. Drop your thoughts in. If you have any thoughts, we're going to come back and react to those. What we will also do is react to some very interesting sound from Lane Kiffin. Remember, Hugh Freeze, he had some things to say after that game on Saturday against Arkansas. And so Hugh Freeze spoke. A lot of people got mad. I defended Hugh Freeze. But then Lane Kiffin had his own thing to say about Hugh Freeze. Who's right? Who's wrong? We're going to take a quick break. We'll discuss that next. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. basketball school Alabama shirts, Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rensselaer Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So want to go ahead and continue the conversation. By the way, appreciate everybody who has dropped your comments in the comments section. A lot of people sharing their picks for Georgia, Bama, picking some of the other big games on the schedule. We will get to all your questions, comments later. Again, if you want to share your thoughts on any of the big games, feel free to drop them in. But we got a few more things to discuss here on this, whatever today is, Tuesday afternoon, early week show. And I want to switch gears, and I want to do a follow-up on a topic that we discussed quite a bit on Sunday night's Aaron Torres pod, and that is certainly a busy and interesting week for Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers. Okay, so Auburn, you probably heard, lost to Arkansas on Saturday. We talked about that game, but really the headline from that game, and I'm just kind of setting this up. We're not going through everything Hugh Freeze said on Sunday, but the headline of that game was that Auburn's quarterback play is just abysmal, okay? 5 total turnovers, 4 interceptions for the quarterbacks, obviously. And on top of that, it's worth noting, Auburn now, right now, coming out of Saturday, coming out of week 4, they now are dead last in total turnovers this year in college football. Not ideal, by the way, going up against an Oklahoma team that's number 1 in the country in turnovers forced. That's a conversation for later in the week. But after the game, Hugh Freeze was asked about it, and Hugh Freeze, transparently, I thought, gave reasonable answers to the situation at hand. Multiple times during his press conference, he said, look, the coaching's got to be better, whatever. But at the same time, there was one quote that certainly made headlines, and it was that Hugh Freeze basically asked about his quarterback situation, said point blank, end of story, and I'm sort of paraphrasing, but I'm sort of not, said we need to find a quarterback who doesn't throw the ball to the other team. Again, when you lead the country in turnovers, when you have had 4 interceptions each against the only power conference teams that you have played, to me, doesn't seem all that controversial. Again, in a perfect world, is it something that you should say? I don't know, but I'm also not going to blame them. The players, they are compensated, and I don't think he should go up and lie and pretend everything is all hunky-dory, okay? So that was what Hugh Freeze said on Saturday. By the way, it's worth noting on Monday night on his coach's show, Hugh Freeze also added that if they played Arkansas 9 more times, they would have beaten them. Didn't really love that. But again, it's a coach's show. If you're an Arkansas fan, you have every right to be frustrated. But I would counter by saying they did turn the ball over 5 times. They had 100 more yards of total offense than Arkansas. By the way, Arkansas, 334 yards. About 70 of them came on one throw from Taylon Green. So again, don't think what Hugh Freeze said about Arkansas was all that controversial. But again, if you're an Arkansas fan, totally understand why you'd be frustrated. Same time, Hugh Freeze, kind of an easy target. We know about his history. We've talked about it a million times. I don't really care what the guy did in his personal life. If his wife forgives him, if his kids forgive him, that's his personal life. But he is an easy target. And when you're an easy target, you know what's going to happen. Other people are going to come after you. Other people are going to use what you say against you. And especially in college football, where recruiting is king, where you're looking for any little edge that you possibly can get, people are going to take advantage when they can. And so I found it interesting because on Monday at his press conference, Lane Kiffin, you know him, current Ole Miss coach, Lane Kiffin was asked about how he handles quarterback situations. Producer Matt, go ahead and play the sound of Lane.
From on the field, there's a trust level there of, we spend a lot of time with him and then let him play too on Saturdays. And I just think that, like you said, it started one way. I think that, you build that, especially for a guy that we didn't really recruit out of high school, any of that, didn't have a previous relationship. And I think it pays off, when you have relationships and the quarterbacks trust you too, and you go back to Matt Corral when he threw 6 interceptions. And before I even got to the media, sitting down with him, telling him, we got to do a better job calling plays. I got to coach better. And don't worry, we got your back. And so I think that goes a long ways, and goes a long ways with kids in recruiting, knowing what they're going to get when they get here from a relationship, and that they can trust us to have their back.
So that was Lane Kiffin talking about how he handles his quarterback situation. Of course, he just so happened to basically say the exact opposite of how Hugh Freeze handled the situation on Saturday. Oh, I went to Matt Corral before I even went to the media, and I said, oh my goodness gracious, I have to do a better job. It's all my fault, not your fault at all, Matt. And so, of course, after Lane Kiffin, who I think smartly said that, when that sound went viral, a funny thing happened. The internet, which likes to gang up on certain people, Jim Harbaugh for years, Brian Kelly for years, certainly Hugh Freeze, the internet all loved what Lane Kiffin had to say. And of course said, oh, this is how you have to do it. Lane Kiffin, this guy, he's Mother Teresa with a headset on. Oh my goodness, look at how he handles things with his quarterbacks versus how Hugh Freeze handles things with his. Lane Kiffin, he's amazing. Except here's the thing. Is Lane Kiffin really that amazing, or is he really kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth? Because at the end of the day, listen, we talked about it on Sunday. I don't love what Hugh Freeze said. But at the same time, I don't think he should lie. I also don't feel too bad about Peyton Thorne or Hank Brown. How about stop throwing the ball to the other team, and then the coach doesn't have to say that? Also, those players are very well compensated, which we discussed. But let's also look at it from a different perspective. Because Lane Kiffin, oh my goodness, he's beating Furman and he's beating Wake Forest, and this guy has all the answers right now. Except here's my question. Is Lane Kiffin's treatment of quarterbacks all that different than Hugh Freeze's? Because I don't think that it is. It's funny that Lane Kiffin mentions Matt Corral, because first of all, he inherited Matt Corral, as he said. This was the pre-portal era, kind of stuck with him, whatever. But he did a very good job with him, got Matt Corral drafted. I think I just saw Matt Corral maybe got released by somebody and is now trying to get another opportunity somewhere else. Anyway, bring it up because Lane Kiffin did a very good job with Matt Corral. Of course, if you remember how things ended for Matt Corral, it was in the Sugar Bowl that, first of all, he just ran Matt Corral literally into the ground. Matt Corral gets hurt in the Sugar Bowl. And what ends up happening after Matt Corral gets hurt in the Sugar Bowl? Oh, I seem to remember what happens. I actually remember very well what happened. He went to a quarterback named Luke Altmaier. Luke Altmaier ended up losing that game. They lose to Baylor. And then a funny thing happened from there. Lane Kiffin, who again, if you ask the internet on Monday night, is Mother Teresa with a visor and a headset. Oh, he went into the portal and replaced Luke Altmaier with Jackson Dart. Yeah. Oh my goodness. This guy that makes it work with every quarterback basically shoved Luke Altmaier out the door. By the way, you know what's even more interesting than that? Jackson Dart comes in. First year, the Ole Miss goes 8-5 with Jackson Dart. And it's easy to forget now because, again, you beat Furman and you got all the answers. But a funny thing happened. Jackson Dart goes 8-5. What does Lane Kiffin do? He goes into the portal not once, but twice to get 2 separate quarterbacks after Jackson Dart's first season at Ole Miss. The guy who loves quarterbacks and he makes it work with everybody. He went into the portal, and what did he do? He got Walker Howard, Spencer Sanders. And you could tell me, oh, they knew they were coming in to be back. No, they weren't. They went into the portal to find a replacement for Jackson Dart. Spencer Sanders had 1 year of eligibility left. That is it. He had 1 year of eligibility left. He was not going to Ole Miss unless he thought that he had a legitimate chance to win the starting quarterback job. Walker Howard, by the way, left LSU, his home state school. By the way, he was the guy that danced with Brian Kelly in that weird video that first year. But I bring it up. Walker Howard left LSU because he knew there was a guy named Jaden Daniels coming back and he wasn't starting. So this idea that Lane Kiffin is just some sort of, again, Mr. Gentile with quarterbacks, it's absolute nonsense. And so, look, I'm not going to spend too much more time on this because I want to get to a couple other topics before we get out of here. But internet, you just have to be better and have to be smarter about how you approach and appreciate and talk about these guys, okay? Because at the end of the day, listen, they're all trying to win games, and they're all going to do essentially whatever it takes to win games. Lane Kiffin is no better, no worse than Hugh Freeze in terms of the portal, in terms of running guys off, in terms of whatever. And oh, by the way, right now it's rocking for Ole Miss. Let's see what happens in a year from now when Jackson Dart's gone. Let's see what happens in a year from now when this. Let's see what happens, by the way, when a lot of young guys that are playing for Hugh Freeze now are sophomores and juniors and seniors, because Hugh Freeze is recruiting about as well as anybody in college football. Not here to completely dismiss what Hugh Freeze said. Would have loved him to handle things a little bit differently. He did not. That's okay. Did not say the perfect thing about Arkansas on Monday night either. But guess what? Lane Kiffin has put his foot in his mouth more than once. Lane Kiffin, by the way, ask anybody. No, I'm not even going to go there. Personal life, whatever. You get the point. Nobody's perfect. Nobody handles every situation perfect. I just found the whole Lane Kiffin thing. Oh my goodness, Lane Kiffin. He's such a good guy and he's got all the answers. It's like he's got all the answers now because he's 3-0. Let's see what happens if he loses to Kentucky next week or LSU in a few weeks or whatever. But yeah, Lane Kiffin going after Hugh Freeze. It is open season on Hugh Freeze. Oh, by the way, I know Oklahoma's got its own quarterback situation. I don't know if it's getting any better on Saturday. All right, really quick. Let's go ahead and wrap on a couple odds and ends. First of all, listen, the realignment stuff, by the way, you can drop all your questions, comments, thoughts. If there's anything interesting, we will get to them to end the show. But a couple thoughts. First of all, realignment just got really weird on Monday afternoon, okay? And we talked about this, if you remember, about 2 weeks or so ago. The Mountain West got raided by the Pac-2. We call them the 2-pack. Now they're the 6-pack because they added Colorado State, San Diego State, Fresno State, and Boise State. And so it has led to this lower level trickle-down effect of realignment. Ultimately, I've said it a million times. I don't believe that any of it really fundamentally alters college football or college sports in general. The only two real things that matter in realignment going forward, and I say this as a UConn guy that everybody's trying to figure out what do they do or whatever. The only two things in realignment that matter: how soon does the ACC break up? And for those top 4, 5, 6 schools, whether it's North Carolina, Virginia, Florida State, Clemson, et cetera, where do they end up? By the way, where do the bottom schools end up as well? Because I don't think there's a landing spot for them. And then the only other thing that really matters is Notre Dame. Same time, we got a weird couple hours on Monday as far as the realignment stands. So let's just dive into it really quick before we get out of here. The first piece of news, I think what's important to note, the Pac-12 is at those 6 schools. And what was interesting was, if you read the reports, if you talk to people in college sports, the school that they were actually targeting, which sounds absurd, but they probably are the best brand, if you will, in the non-Power 4 right now. It was actually Memphis. Okay. So Memphis was kind of the key domino for a lot of this. Great basketball program, good football program. The important thing to note, they got plenty of NIL money. FedEx has, what is it, $25 million over 5 years they've promised in NIL money. So, Memphis is kind of a prized commodity. And so the thought process was, if Memphis is the target of the Pac-12. If Memphis ends up leaving, then South Florida and Tulane from the AAC would go with them, okay? Well, I bring it up because on Monday, Memphis basically said, we're good. And I don't think there's an interesting take to have on this. I don't really blame Memphis, right? Because what would have ended up happening, first of all, we know that in this new world, travel is an issue, Olympic sports are an issue. And what Memphis basically said was, one, the Pac-12 is claiming this much money in TV money. We don't know if they can actually get there. And then 2, when you factor in everything else, does it really even make sense? Does it really matter? So Memphis, Tulane, South Florida, and actually Texas San Antonio all announcing they're staying in the AAC. Well, there was an interesting development. There was a couple interesting developments after that as well. First of all, there was a report that Gonzaga was leaving for the Pac-12 from Brett McMurphy. That was immediately shot down by John Rothstein, by Ross Dellinger, by 2 or 3 other people. So I don't know if McMurphy jumped the gun, but that was certainly an interesting moment in time. And then there was even a weird other thing that happened as well. It's because the rest of the Mountain West, which is about 5-6 schools at this point, they took 4. So we're talking about Utah State, UNLV, San Jose State, Air Force, whatever. They all kind of had this binding agreement that they would all stay together in the Mountain West. Well, as you can see on the scroller, Utah State basically broke that binding verbal commitment. They're out. They're headed to the Pac-12. And now UNLV, which had committed to return to the Mountain West, now they're trying to figure out some things as well. So I don't know if you followed all that, but the bottom line is it just got weird. The important thing, Memphis, South Florida, Tulane, they're staying. And I think from Memphis's perspective, they're kind of like, dude, at some point, all this crap is going to break off. We got so much money. We're going to be able to buy our way in, kind of like SMU. But there's no reason to join Oregon State and Washington State all the way out there. It's not going to help us at all. The Gonzaga thing I think is interesting because I do think there's probably at least a possibility that they do end up in the Pac-12 here sometime in the not too distant future. And yeah, that was what happened for those of you who were not on social media all day Monday with the realignment stuff. It got weird. It got crazy, but that is what you need to know. All right, finally, do want to do just a little bit of college hoops recruiting because as I've said a million times on this channel, it's football season. We're all locked in on football season. I mean, everybody, even the big basketball brands, Indiana's playing well. Arkansas is playing well. Carolina was playing well until whatever happened with James Madison the other day. But I bring it up because there are a couple recruiting notes that I want to get to. And I do think there is at least one very important note as it pertains to one of the best players in high school basketball and a player that is coveted by everybody in America. It is a player named Braylon Mullins. Okay, so Braylon Mullins is a 6'5" guard from the state of Indiana. And really just blew up over the summer. Was a 4-star. Now he's a consensus 5-star. And what's interesting about his recruitment, it just blew up. Everybody was interested. But at the same time, he's taken a couple visits, and we were told he was going to cut his list to 5 this week. Had already taken visits to UConn, had taken a visit to Michigan, North Carolina, and most recently Indiana, his home state school. By the way, for people wondering, no, I'm not wearing an Indiana shirt. Let's establish that right now. I'm wearing a Jerry Tarkanian shirt. Shout out to Tark the Shark. Anyway, had taken visits, was projected to take a visit to Kentucky, and I think everybody thought that in the end, those would be the 5 schools that made his final 5. Well, I bring it up because on Tuesday, right before we started recording, Braylon Mullins officially announced that he has cut his list not to 5, but to 3. As he will choose between Indiana, UConn, and North Carolina. He has cut out Kentucky. He has cut out Michigan. And oh, by the way, over the last couple weeks, he has cut out other schools. Duke was in the mix for a minute. Kansas was in the mix for a minute as well. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's talk about where I ultimately think he'll end up. And first of all, let's talk about some of the schools that he eliminated. The Kentucky thing, I think it's interesting. But if you actually follow college hoops recruiting, and I know if you're listening to this clip or segment or show, you do. Bottom line is, always thought Kentucky was a little bit of a stretch. And I think Kentucky fans even knew that Kentucky was a little bit of a stretch. It was a cool story. He got offered over the summer. Pope is giving him a tour of Rupp Arena, takes him to the upper level next to all the banners and says, I want you to be a Wildcat. Here's your official offer. But when Kentucky took Jasper Johnson a couple weeks ago, the 5-star guard who's originally from Kentucky, there was always this question of, does Braylon Mullins actually fit at Kentucky? Jasper Johnson's kind of an off-the-ball guy. Braylon Mullins is kind of an off-the-ball guy. So it never really made sense. But as long as that October visit to Kentucky was on the books, you always thought they had a shot. Well, Kentucky's been eliminated. I think we can all assume that that visit is off the books again. So Kentucky's gone. Michigan always felt like a dark horse contender. I never really thought they had much of a chance. I get, by the way, Dusty May is from the state of Indiana originally, kind of has that Indiana sensibility even at Michigan. but it never really felt like it was the perfect fit. And if I had to guess, if there was a final three coming into today, it would have been these three schools: UConn, Indiana, and North Carolina. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's go ahead and dive in. First of all, from the Carolina perspective, we've talked about it a lot, okay? Carolina, they're going to need guards. And listen, Carolina, it speaks for itself. Blue blood, history, Michael Jordan, Jordan Brand, whatever. It's a great spot. If you want to go there, you should go there. Like, if I could do college all over again, that's a place that I would have loved to go to, even though I turned out all right going to be a Husky, okay? But same time, it also makes sense because they play 5 out or 4 out at the very least. They shoot a ton of threes, and they're going to need dudes after this season, okay? RJ Davis is a 5th-year senior. RJ Davis has 0 eligibility after this year. Well, he's your starting 2 guard right now. Kind of would make sense to bring in somebody to replace him, especially a guy that many believe to be the best shooting player in all of high school basketball. Ian Jackson, a 5-star guard, very likely could be gone after this season. What does that mean? Probably means, again, that there is space available in the backcourt. We'll see about Elliot Cadeau, whatever. From the UConn perspective, listen, UConn is UConn right now. And I'm not saying this to be arrogant or sarcastic, but UConn right now is the gold standard and the place that if you have the opportunity to go to, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of that? Okay. Dan Hurley is doing stuff, at an elite level. He's developing pros. That aren't necessarily the 5-star guys. He's developing guys for the NBA. And bluntly, Braylon Mullins, his talent really kind of fits kind of that UConn style of play, that UConn offense that Luke Murray is behind. And you think about what UConn did well these last 2 years: shoot the ball, 3-point shooting, spacing, ball movement, all those things that UConn does well. 2 years ago was Jordan Hawkins. This past year it was Cam Spencer. This coming year, maybe Aiden Mahaney, maybe Liam McNeil, whoever it is. And then you look ahead to 25, 26, Braylon Mullins fits nearly perfectly. I also thought it was worth noting. Saw this quote. I apologize. I forget who exactly got this quote. It might have been Adam Zagori or something. But Braylon Mullins was asked about Dan Hurley. He said, Coach Hurley's a great coach. Player development is what we've been talking about. He says I can come on campus for 10 months and reach my ultimate goals. I also love the campus and the coaching staff. I built a good relationship with Coach Murray and Coach Hurley. And so for a kid that, listen, the last couple months was deemed up until the last couple months was deemed a 4-star. If Dan Hurley and Luke Murray are telling you can be a one and done with what we do, then you got to believe that is an appealing thing to Braylon Mullins. Now, listen, if you're 2 and done, 3 and done, whatever, but we'll see. But I mean, that's a pretty appealing thing. The Indiana stuff, it goes without saying. He's from Indiana. Listen, we can make fun of how good has Indiana been, whatever. But he's from Indiana. He grew up about an hour away. Again, by the way, this is not an Indiana shirt. Just let the record show. Not favoring one school or the other. But he grew up about an hour away. And it's worth noting, on Monday, his former AAU teammate, Trent Sisley, committed to Indiana. Trent Sisley and him are really close. Trent Sisley's an Indiana kid. They played on Indiana Elite on the Adidas circuit over the course of the summer. And so you know that those two are in each other's ear. You know, by the way, that the coaching staff is in their ear. Hey, come here, play together. By the way, the coaching staff is going to sell, we'll feature you just the same. It's worth noting in Indiana, there's the possibility that there could be availability in the backcourt next year as well. Cannon Carlisle, I think, could blow up and be a potential one-and-done type player at Indiana. Can criticize Mike Woodson for a lot, but he puts the ball in his playmakers' hands. And if you're good enough, he's turned a couple guys' careers around. Jalen Hood-Schifino was not projected one-and-done until he got to Indiana. Boom, he's gone in a year. Kalel Ware, there were question marks. Boom, first-round pick after 1 year. And so I bring it up because I don't think it's crazy to think that Cannon Carlisle could be a potential one-and-done. Ball's going to be in Miles Rice's hands. Cannon Carlisle, when I say one-and-done, by the way, I know he's a sophomore, but you get the point, a one-and-done at Indiana. So there could be availability there, but Indiana's also selling, come be the home state kid at your home state school with your AAU buddy. And also think it's kind of worth noting. I think this part is worth noting as well, is that all reports are that the Indiana NIL is as good as anybody's in college basketball. We saw the rumors and the numbers on Umar Ballo, who's now at Indiana. And for a home state kid, I think it's a lot like Jasper Johnson. Kentucky was kind of willing to quote unquote overpay to keep the hometown kid at home. Sure, Indiana is willing to do the same. I'll be honest, as far as an actual pick, I think it's too early. UConn fans and people hit me up all the time. Torres, what about this kid? What about that kid? It's like, if the kid knew, I think he'd probably have committed by now. But the truth to me is that I think the UConn pitch is appealing. I think the Indiana pitch, being the hometown kid, is certainly appealing. The Carolina pitch is appealing. If I had to guess, I think it comes down to Indiana and UConn. And I'm not even going to speculate because I don't think it's fair to the kid to do that. But this is a 5-star talent. Whenever he commits, we will talk about it. All right. I think that's it for this episode of the Aaron Torres Pod. We got any interesting questions in the comments, Matt? If we don't, it's okay. I saw a lot of people sharing their thoughts on some of the big college football games, but yeah. Tony Smith says Ole Miss, Kentucky over Ole Miss. Okay. Well, that's an interesting one. We'll preview Kentucky Ole Miss. The one thing I will say, I know I made fun of Lane Kiffin a little bit a minute ago. We're going to find out a lot about how good Ole Miss is, probably more than any team in college football, the most untested team so far this season. I think that Kentucky defense travels. Mark Stoops always plays it close to the vest on the road. I think Kentucky wins. I think Ole Miss wins, but I think it's probably going to be a little bit closer than people think. Anything else? Ooh, the big Lubbock with an interesting one. He says Oklahoma won't make a bowl game this year. I'll tell you what, you don't beat Auburn this weekend, I think that's a very distinct possibility. You still got Texas on the schedule. You still got Ole Miss on the schedule. You still got at LSU. You still got Alabama on the schedule. I think you got Missouri as well. Let me pull up the Oklahoma schedule really quick. They sit at 3-1 right now. They still have left on the schedule Texas on a neutral, at Ole Miss, at Missouri, Alabama at home, at LSU. That's an insane stretch, okay? You don't win this game, I do think there is a possibility that you probably don't make a bowl game. I don't think that's some crazy, absurd take. I would add this, though. I saw, and we mentioned this on Monday's show, I saw a lot of the Venables is in over his head in the SEC. I don't think so. I think he bet, literally and figuratively, put all his chips in the Jackson Arnold pot, and it was the wrong kid. I think if they have Dylan Gabriel, they probably don't beat Tennessee, but they're a much better offense. And I think Dylan Gabriel is kind of the quarterback that you need right now behind a beat-up, inexperienced O-line. You need a guy that gets rid of the ball quick, boom, 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 boom. What you do not need is a kind of a bigger pocket passing type guy in Jackson Arnold. So I think that's why Hawkins, that was the right move, is because you start the guy that can make plays with his feet. That's what you need behind an inexperienced O-line. Producer Matt, anything else? If there's not much else, we can go ahead and get out of here. But this was a fun Tuesday show. Tuesday's kind of that middle of the week. How much do you really want to look ahead, but you don't want to look back? So, it's a fun time of the week. And as always, we appreciate everybody's support who is joining us on the show today. If you are not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod, do me a favor, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music. By the way, Larry Gray says Roll Tide. Well, we'll see. We'll see if Torres looks smart or dumb come Saturday night. But it is time for us to get out of here right now. If you're not subscribed, please listen. First of all, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure to do so. I think we are operating at as high of a level on YouTube as anybody. We're putting out great content every day. These live streams, these clips, everything we do, we're crushing. So we appreciate your support. If you're not subscribed, though, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcasts, make sure to do so. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. If you are subscribed on Apple or Spotify, go ahead, give us a 5-star rating and review. We really do appreciate your support there. Helps us move up the charts. Also, make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. If you have any questions for the show, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. If you have any questions for the show, tell you what, we will be back probably Thursday night. We'll see. Maybe tomorrow we come back on Wednesday. Probably Thursday We'll do a deeper dive on the week 5 slate. And we'll talk about some other stuff, that pops up over the course of the week. But do think for now it is time for us to get out of here. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to everybody who had things to say in the chat. The chat was humming today. We appreciate your support. We'll be back Thursday afternoon. New episode, Aaron Torres Pod. And by the way, thank you again to Cauley Puffs. As you can see on the screen, visit CauleyPuffs.com. Also,